Hey guys, Tom Barclay here. Just got back from the London Stadium after watching an excellent 3-0 win for Tottenham Hotspur over West Ham. They made very light work of it thanks to a 19-minute blitz in the second half. I have to say the first half was pretty dull at times, and it just felt like an exercise in waiting to find out when Spurs would finally get through with one of their corner routines, which West Ham, for the first half at least, managed to repel, even though one of the times they looked like they didn't and had a goal scored against them, which was then ruled out by the referee in VAR. Felt like that should definitely have counted. But in the second half, Spurs got the early goal from a corner, and then after Thomas Souček got sent off for a bit of a wild tackle, which was definitely a red card, then Spurs sort of ran away from there. So let's get into it. So first of all, from team selection points of view, it's quite interesting from Thomas Frank. He sprung a little bit of a surprise, starting Matthijs Tel up front. Matthijs Tel, who's been a bit of a talking point of late, because obviously he wasn't included in the Champions League squad. Thomas Frank talked about that decision on Friday in the press conference ahead of the game, where he said it was a very difficult decision and a very unfair one, he said. And he praised Tel for the way he had responded to what is obviously a disappointment for the 20-year-old. But yet it was still a surprise to see him start the game. Now, the logic behind starting him up front was the fact that obviously Solanke's injured with this nagging, grumbling ankle problem. Grumbling was the word that Frank used before the international break. Kolo Muani's obviously was in line to make his debut, but he hasn't played in such a long time that Frank basically warned yesterday that he suggested that if he was going to feature, he was going to feature off the bench. In the end, he didn't even get off the bench. And then there's obviously Richarlison, who's a bit of the man of the moment, but he's just played for Brazil against Ecuador, which obviously generally in Ecuador they play at massively high levels above sea level, which can affect players' fitness. And he decided to start him on the bench. So he started with Tel. And I don't want to start on like a negative because obviously it was a really good day all round, but I can't say that from Tel's performance I was convinced any more than I have been before that he definitely feels like a centre forward in the Premier League at this point. I'm still not sure that's the case. And to be fair to Frank, he's talked about how he sees him more of a winger, and he said his performance all round was a sort of 7 out of 10 performance, and he praised him for his pressing and his work rate, which I think you'll always get from Matthijs Tel. I mean, Harry Kane talked about how Tel had fantastic work rate and attitude before Spurs signed him. So that's never been in doubt. It's hard playing centre forward in the Premier League for even players who play there regularly. But I do feel like personally that Tel would benefit from a loan where he can play regularly, maybe to another English team. And yeah, he wasn't really involved that much. He didn't really touch the ball that much. But I suppose it's, to look at it positively, first of all, Spurs played with a forward who is yet to convince that he can really play there and still won the game 3-0. But I think more importantly, it showed that Thomas Frank is willing to take some quite difficult decisions, or decisions that might even jeopardise his team's prospects on the face of it, to ensure that all steps are taken to make sure players don't get injured. So obviously the obvious choice would have been to play Richarlison, with Solanke not being injured himself, and Kolo Muani not being fit, and Matthijs Tel not really seeming like he's up to it playing in that position. But he decided not to do it. He took a risk, took a gamble on Tel, and to protect Richarlison, and it came through. So fair play to him. He also played Xavi Simons for his debut, and he played him off the left. Simons actually talks about it after the game, how generally throughout his career he's been a number 10, but in recent years he's played off the left. I thought he was pretty good. I wasn't blown away by Xavi. There have been a few tweets I've seen of really praising his performance. I would say he had a couple of moments where one reverse pass that basically went to no one. One time he ran the ball off the pitch, which was slightly careless, but overall I liked the calmness he brought in possession to the team. Maybe something that's been a little lacking from the team. It feels like he's someone who wants the ball, he wants to create, and he doesn't get flustered when he's on the ball, and that's something really welcome to this team and a real added attribute to it. And he obviously got an assist as well for the goal, the first goal in the second half, first goal of the game, with an accurate corner. I don't think it was the best delivery in the world. It was basically just fired to the back post, and West Ham, who defended up until that point pretty well from set pieces, suddenly left Papamatta Sarr completely free as a bird, and he had all the time in the world to jump and plant his header into the West Ham goal, which he did brilliantly. And afterwards, it was interesting. I didn't see this, but one of my colleagues was saying that they all then pointed over Andreas Georgeson, the set piece coach, on the sidelines. So clearly, that was a sort of routine that paid off. And all round Spurs' set pieces, they obviously, we know it's been a big part of Thomas Frank since he's come in to Tottenham. Something he's really wanted to sort of develop at Spurs. But this game, it felt even more relevant, and you could see they were targeting it because West Ham have got a really terrible record already this season from set pieces. That was apparently the 6th goal they conceded from set pieces already this season, which is really, frankly, worrying from their perspective. But Mohamed Kudus, who obviously was getting dogs abuse throughout, particularly when he went to take corners at his old club. I mean, he was firing in some really, really good deliveries. We might as well go to the goal that was disallowed in the first half, which felt at the time like it was going to be a big talking point because of it being, to be honest, unjust in what happened. It shouldn't have been ruled out, I don't think. So basically, Kudus fires in the corner to the near post. Cristian Romero rises high and heads it into the corner. Brilliant header, great goal. And then it's ruled out for an alleged foul from Mickey van der Ven on Kyle Walker-Peters, a push, which, to be honest, Van der Ven himself had been pushed by, I think it was Matheus Fernandes. It wasn't a foul in my mind, but Jared Gillett, the referee, gave it. VAR backed him up, and I can understand why the Spurs fans and team were unhappy with that. Romero seemed to be very angry. Frank afterwards said it was definitely should have been given as a goal. And then James Maddison even tweeted, presumably watching, throwing things at his TV back home. He's obviously nursing that ACL injury, talking about how badly referees have started this season, and saying basically just saying it was a terrible decision. And I agree with him. And you could also argue that Spurs should have had a penalty as well soon after, when Fernandes brings down Mickey van der Ven. He's not even looking at the ball and he's grappling with him. And it just feels like a classic case of a smaller player taking on a bigger, physically bigger player and getting away with what seemed to me like a foul. Frank afterwards said it was a sort of 60-40 situation where he felt it should have been a penalty. But ultimately it didn't matter because Spurs came through in the second half. So after a not particularly fascinating first half, second half was very much different. There was some real sparks in those first 19 minutes. So first of all, Sarr scores the goal from the corner, and then we've got shortly afterwards Lucas Bergvall, who I haven't mentioned yet, and I really should have because he was probably the standout performer today, or one of, who scored his first goal and grabbed his first assist. First goal in the Premier League with this brilliant header, but he also grabbed an assist. So I believe he became the first youngest Tottenham player since Nicky Barmby to score an assist in the Premier League game. He's obviously only 19, Lucas Bergvall. And it was just a brilliant header. So it came from the free kick, which was given after Thomas Tuchel got sent off. So this was probably one of the quickest red cards I've seen issued live. So basically, I don't think he meant to hurt him, but it was definitely a red card. So Souček goes in so high on João Palhinha that he rips his sock with his challenge. Gillett straight away gives him a red card on what was Souček's 250th appearance for West Ham, and he walks down the pitch. And that kind of changed the game to a certain extent. That and the sort of 1-2 knockout blow that came shortly afterwards. So from the resulting free kick, the ball was given to Romero, who plays this brilliant ball over the top. I mean, his distribution has got to be up there as some of the best in the world when it comes to centre backs. When he's on his game, he's just fantastic. He can really thread the ball through an eye of a needle, or over one in this case, over the defence. And Bergvall, it's a hard header to execute. He manages to get enough power on it to lift it over Mads Hermansen, who had a bit of a shocker for West Ham generally in his performance, but couldn't really do anything about this header. And it was brilliant. And Bergvall's fascinating. I find him really, in terms of what kind of player he's going to be. I'm still not sure what kind of midfielder he will be going forward, because he is capable of playing in so many different positions, whether it be a number 6 like we thought he would be when he first came in, or whether he's going to be more of a number 8, or if he's going to be a number 10. I think he can play in all different positions, and I think that's partly why Frank likes him a lot as well. He loves versatile players who can play in different positions. You know, Xavi, as already mentioned, playing off the left. Obviously, will play a number 10 a lot as well. Kudus has been playing in different positions. I think Frank will really look to make the most of Bergvall's versatility. Frank, more than most managers, feels like a proper horses for courses manager, i.e. he's gonna mix it up whoever the opposition is, whether it be his tactics, his formation, where he puts players. And I think players who can show that range of ability to play in different positions will really thrive under him. And I think Bergvall is one of those. And the fact that Bergvall played meant that Bentancur was on the bench, which showed the strength and depth that Spurs have. It was good to see them thrive without Bentancur, because he's been such a key player. It gives him a rest going into the Villarreal game, and it just shows that Spurs can still flourish even without their big hitters, which they're going to need at times when they get injured or suspended or whatever throughout the season. I think Frank deserves a lot of credit for that. I do think, after a manager who got criticised a lot for not mixing it up enough until he finally did massively in the Europa League, in Ange, who will always be given credit like he absolutely deserves for delivering that trophy, I do think there is a thirst amongst the Spurs fans to see an ability to mix it up. And Thomas Frank has definitely shown that already in his first sort of 6 weeks or so. And that's really welcome. As is the set pieces. Like, I honestly don't believe that Ange doesn't care about set pieces, but either way, even if you don't really buy into him, knocking it down from a public perspective, there's no doubting that his record from set piece perspective wasn't mind-blowing. It wasn't great at all, I would say, in the first season. Second season wasn't as bad, but it wasn't something that was a major strength of Tottenham's under him, either offensively or defensively, whereas it certainly was for Thomas Frank's Brentford last season, and it already feels like it is under him at Spurs. And personally, I do feel there are too many Premier League games these days which seem to be like proper chess matches that are just defined by a set piece mistake or a set piece exploitation from one side, which is making it less interesting to watch. But hey, if that's the game, then you've really got to make the most of those little marginal gains. And in Thomas Frank, Spurs have got a manager who is all over that and is making the most of it and getting his team to capitalise on it. And I think that really will be to Spurs' benefit going forward. So that was good to see. So after that, then Bergvall gets an assist as well for Van de Ven's goal. It's funny, Van de Ven had a bit of a laugh and a joke with Frank as he came off, and my good friend Ali Gold asked Frank afterwards in the press conference what that was about, and basically Frank just joked that he's been wanting more goals from set pieces from Van de Ven, but he said that it didn't really count effectively. He wants a header from him, and I do think both Van de Ven and Romero, the way it's going, could end up with some decent goal tallies this season, as long as they stay fit in this Frank system. I can see them both scoring 4 or 5 goals this season because of the way they're lining up and the way they're exploiting set pieces, and because of those two players' absolute quality in the air. And then if you add in the fact that Van de Ven often chips in with goals like he did today, yeah, he could be a real one for fantasy football enthusiasts, I would say, particularly with the set piece, especially with the clean sheets that Spurs are racking up at the moment. So what else was there to talk about? So I think I've mentioned most of the points. So obviously they're up to second or joint second going into today's game. Obviously Liverpool play away to Burnley, so you'd imagine they would win and go clear at the top of the league. But a really good response to what was a pretty dreadful performance and a bad result against Bournemouth before the international break. Classic Spurs, they always seem to throw in a terrible performance ahead of the international break, but they were bad against Bournemouth, and it really did seem to sort of check the momentum that had been built under in the first few weeks under Frank. But this was back to a real savvy performance, which West Ham really had no answer to, and made the most of their frailties, of which there are many at the moment, I would say, for West Ham. It was perfect viewing for the new era of Spurs, with Viv Lewis sitting up in the stands alongside her son-in-law Nick Butcher, another person who's going to be very influential, it seems, next to Vinay Venkatesham, the CEO, and Johan Lang, the technical director. And they must have been looking down, watching, someone like Romero, who obviously they've committed to signing a new contract this summer, as a really great piece of business, played really, really well. Looking at, the way Mohamed Kudus didn't get a goal, that was all that was lacking from his performance, not getting that goal that he probably deserved against his former team. He played really, really well. Xavi, like I said, had a pretty encouraging debut, if not, something that was to be bowled over by. I think there's a lot to be excited about, and more than anything, to be excited in the faith that they put in. And to be fair to Daniel Levy, in this first game of the non-Daniel Levy, the Daniel Levy era, he was the man who appointed Thomas Frank. But already it's looking like a manager who has got the wherewithal to mix it up and capitalise on all the sort of marginal gains that seemingly football these days has really developed into. And he just feels like a really modern manager who's going to leave no stone unturned to give Spurs that edge that they need. And with the amount of players to come back into the fray, players to develop from here, whether it be Xavi in particular, to sort of see what he can do going forward. Kolo Muani obviously didn't get off the bench. Obviously Solanke's been injured. When he finally comes back, there's a lot of options now for Tottenham. I mean, think of Destiny Udogie, he's just came off the bench. I mean, Jed Spencer's now an England international. But the competition for fullback places is really exciting, and the sort of variety of profiles as well. Again, back to the sort of horses for courses nature of Frank's managerial style, I think gives him a lot of assets to play with, and that's really exciting. And overall, just a really good win for Spurs, which was their biggest win at West Ham since 1962. West Ham have often been a difficult team for Spurs to go and win, particularly away. And like I say, a brilliant recovery from the Bournemouth game that sets them up really nicely for Villarreal at home on Tuesday. Anyway, let me know your thoughts, guys. There's the podcast that I've done with Marcus Buckland as well, out on the Tottenham Way. Go and check that out on the YouTube, Tottenham Way Pod as well. See what you think. He's obviously very happy as a big Spurs fan after that result. But I'd love to know your thoughts on what you think about that particular performance, and what more you'd like to see, what was encouraging about it, and what you think is possible under Thomas Frank in this new era of the Lewis family, the younger generation. Cheers, guys.